I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was leaning against the chip counter at the corner cafe, the one where the sun slanted just right across the worn wooden floor. I've been coming here almost every day for months, mostly to sit alone with my laptop open, scrolling aimlessly, while everyone else around me seemed to know exactly what they were doing. She walked in like she usually did, slightly hurried, holding a leather tote bag that had seen better days. My stomach did that quiet flip that I didn't bother hiding anymore. I looked down at the menu board, pretending to be absorbed, though I already knew I'd get the same thing. Black coffee, no sugar, a little too bitter, but comforting all the same. "Hey," she said, setting her bag down. The usual. I froze for a beat, then nodded. "Yeah, thanks." There was something in the way she said it, like she'd noticed the pause, like she knew exactly what I was thinking before I even thought it. She had this tiny crease at the corner of her mouth when she smiled, just enough to make me question whether I had imagined it the first time I saw her. I fiddled with the edge of my notebook, watching her from the corner of my eye as she pulled out a chair at the next table. Her hands rested lightly on the table, fingers tapping an almost imperceptible rhythm against her coffee cup. I wondered if she always did that, or if it was just today. My heart wanted to answer, but my voice didn't. "So, you're really into that sci-fi series, huh?" she said, nodding toward my laptop screen without looking up. Yeah," I muttered. "I mean, it's okay." My fingers twitched, wanting to explain more, but I didn't. I couldn't. She chuckled softly, and it wasn't the kind of laugh you hear on TV. It was careful, tucked into the space between words, like she was saving it just for herself. I remembered little things about her without trying. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The faint scent of vanilla, and something else I couldn't name. How she always ordered the same coffee, no sugar like mine. I sent a text while she was at the counter, a text I never sent anyone else. Wish she'd noticed me. Then I deleted it. My thumb hovered over the screen a few times before I finally put the phone back in my pocket. We didn't talk much after that. Mostly it was small, quiet exchanges. A smile here, a glance there. My favorite was when she'd raise an eyebrow at something I said. Not judging, not laughing, just noticing. And every time she did, I felt a little less invisible, a little less like the pauses in my own life were endless. I watched her stand to leave, coat draped over her arm, bag swinging lightly. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I folded the napkin in front of me 3 times, exactly how she'd once folded one absent-mindedly, and looked up just in time to catch her eyes flick toward mine. A long, careful glance. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and left. The bell over the door chimed, and I sat there for a long minute, heart loud in the quiet cafe, coffee gone cold. And then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Left this for you. Thought you might need it." I stared at the screen, thumb frozen over the notification. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew. Somehow, I knew it was hers. The next day, I found myself back at her apartment to fix a leaky faucet she'd mentioned over the phone. She wasn't one to fuss over things like that. Divorced, a little tired around the edges. But there was a careful warmth in the way she let me in, like I wasn't just a kid she knew through her son. "I didn't think anyone would actually come," she said, rolling up her sleeves, her tone light, almost teasing. But I could hear the slight catch in her voice. "It's not that hard," I mumbled, crouching under the sink. My hands were wet and cold, but I didn't mind. I could hear her humming softly in the kitchen, the sound ordinary yet intimate in a way that made my stomach tighten. When I emerged, dripping a little, she handed me a mug of tea without a word. I hadn't noticed how much I'd been holding my breath. We stood in the cramped kitchen, tea steaming between us. I sipped, careful not to spill, and she leaned against the counter, watching me like she'd memorized the motion. "You know," she said after a pause, "my ex used to fix things like that. I'm glad you did it instead." There was a lightness in her tone, but something in the way she looked away suggested it wasn't entirely casual. I nodded, unsure what to say. I wanted to tell her that I'd imagined scenarios where she noticed me, where she smiled at me like she did now, but the words lodged somewhere between my throat and the mug in my hands. We didn't speak for a while. Just the ticking clock, the soft hiss of the kettle cooling, the quiet scrape of my fingers on the ceramic mug. I found myself watching her hands again, slender, deliberate, the way she tilted her tea before sipping. Tiny movements that somehow made everything feel heavier, more loaded with meaning than it should have been. Then she laughed, soft, dry, like she was laughing at herself more than anything. I never realized how quiet it is when no one's arguing over the faucet. She flicked her eyes toward me, and for a moment, it felt like the apartment had shrunk to the two of us alone. I said, voice catching, "It's nice." She tilted her head slightly, thoughtful, then reached over to adjust the handle on the sink. Her fingers brushed mine, just for a second, long enough to send a jolt through my chest, but brief enough that it could have been accidental. I swallowed and looked away, heart hammering in silence. "You always notice the small stuff," she said quietly, almost a statement to herself. "I guess I do," I admitted, fumbling with my mug. The moment lingered, her gaze soft, mine avoiding, both of us aware of how wrong it might be. Too close, too much, but not wrong enough to stop thinking about it. When I left, she didn't say goodbye. Instead, she held the door open a fraction longer than necessary, watching me step out into the afternoon light. Her eyes flicked up to mine, a small, unspoken acknowledgement, and I felt like I'd been handed something I wasn't supposed to have, but couldn't let go of anyway. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I kept finding reasons to linger in the apartment. It wasn't anything intentional, not really. Just that I noticed things I couldn't explain, like how the sunlight hit the edge of her bookshelves, or the way she'd leave a half-empty mug on the counter. Just so. That afternoon, I was helping her rearrange a stack of old magazines. My hand brushed hers as we reached for the same one, and she froze for a split second. I felt it, her hesitation, and pulled my hand back, silently, even though I wanted to leave it there. Maybe the other shelf," I suggested, fumbling with the stack. She nodded, not looking at me. Her hair fell forward, hiding her face, but I could feel her eyes. I wanted to ask what she was thinking, but words felt clumsy. Instead, I just moved the magazines, keeping a careful rhythm so our hands wouldn't meet again. I heard the door click downstairs. The neighbor, probably. I imagined her stiffening, a small twitch in her shoulders, and I realized everything about this place, this routine, could be interrupted at any moment. That made it dangerous. That made it thrilling in a quiet way. I wanted to ask her what she wanted exactly, but the thought died in my chest before it left my lips. She shifted, reaching for a cup on the counter, and our fingers nearly touched again. I stared at her hand, tracing the path it wanted to take. She sighed, a small sound, more frustration at the magazines than anything else, but I caught the slight quiver of her lips. I wanted to reach out to say something, anything, but I didn't. The silence was heavier than words. Then her son's voice rang out from the hallway. A laugh, a call, a normal intrusion into a fragile bubble. She flinched slightly and gave me a quick, awkward smile before rushing to the living room. I felt my chest tighten, the moment breaking like thin glass. I lingered behind, pretending to straighten a crooked frame on the wall. I watched her through the kitchen arch, the way her hands clutched the edge of the couch. She seemed distant now, but the tension hadn't left. Not completely. I left an hour later. She walked me to the door, lingering longer than necessary. Her hand brushed mine as she handed me my coat. A whisper of warmth. My heart jumped, almost unsteady, and I caught her eyes, searching for a sign. Her gaze flicked down, then back to mine. Close. So close. Like she was about to say something, or let me say something. But she didn't. Instead, she tilted her head, just a fraction, and let the moment hang. I stepped out into the hallway, my fingers tingling from where hers had brushed mine. The door clicked behind me, and I felt the weight of what didn't happen, what almost happened, settle in my chest. I wanted to turn back. I didn't, and yet I couldn't stop replaying that tiny, unfinished gesture. Her eyes meeting mine, her hands so close, the air between us charged with a quiet possibility. I didn't see her for 2 days. Not that I called or texted, My phone sat on a nightstand like it was judging me. The apartment felt heavier, smaller, empty in the corners where she usually left her presence. When she finally answered the door, I noticed it immediately. The way she held herself tighter, the slight narrowing of her eyes, a measured pause before she spoke. "Hey," I said, voice too loud, too eager. "Hi," she replied, almost clipped. Her bag swung at her side, the strap tight against her shoulder. She was moving faster than usual, like she had somewhere urgent to be. I noticed the small tremor in her hands, though she tried to hide it. We walked to the small park nearby, a bench under the trees where sunlight dappled through the bare branches. Usually, we'd linger, talk about nothing in particular, the air between us soft with pauses. Today was different. She sat first, folding her hands in her lap. I stayed standing, unsure, until she waved me down. I sat a little too close, careful not to touch, careful not to breathe too loud. She started, then stopped, staring at a leaf caught in the cracks of the pavement. I waited, heart hammering, but the words didn't come. I wanted to ask her if she was okay. Wanted to reach across, steady her. But instead, I watched her shift, shoulders tightening, eyes flicking to mine and away again. "If you weren't here," she said finally, voice low, almost fragile. I noticed. I tried, but the words stumbled. My hands fidgeted with the zipper on my jacket. "I didn't want to see me," she asked. And then she added, softer, almost under her breath, "or be seen." I swallowed hard. She was saying something I almost understood, almost wanted to hear, but the weight of it made my chest ache. I imagined all the times I'd lingered, all the times I'd imagined her noticing me, really noticing me, and now it was too close, too real. I leaned forward, almost the urge to bridge the gap pressing against me. My words broke. Her gaze lifted, sharp and sudden. "Don't." It wasn't angry. It wasn't even a warning. Just caution, fear, something fragile I couldn't name. I froze, hands halfway to reaching her, my pulse loud in my ears. For a long moment, we just breathed. A leaf fell between us. A dog barked somewhere distant. My fingers itched to close the space between us, and I knew she felt it too. But she didn't move, didn't let me. Finally, she stood, bag over her shoulder again. "I have to go," she said, soft, final. I nodded, words lost. I wanted to ask her something, what was really happening, what she was feeling, but my voice wouldn't cooperate. Instead, I just watched her walk away, step after measured step. And I knew, somehow, that whatever this was, whatever had been building between us, it was balancing on a knife's edge. I don't know if she even felt it, but I did. Every heartbeat, every pause, every unsaid word. And the question hung there, unspoken, as she disappeared down the path. Do we stop, or do we fall anyway? I hadn't heard from her all week. Not a text, not a missed call, not even the faintest "hey" that might have slipped through by accident. I kept imagining reasons. Work, errands, a child to pick up, a meeting I didn't know about. When I finally saw her, it wasn't in the apartment, wasn't planned. She was at the small bookstore where I sometimes killed hours pretending to read, perched near the poetry section with her coat draped over the chair back. She looked lighter, almost smiling at someone on the other side of the aisle. I froze. The book slipped from my hands and thudded against the floor, loud in the quiet shop. She turned, eyes wide, and for a moment, I thought I'd imagined it, that I wasn't supposed to be here. This is I started. She glanced past me, hesitated, and the flicker in her gaze was gone. She smiled tightly. "Hey." Her voice, even casual, carried something I couldn't name. Not warmth, not distance, something in between. My chest tightened, and I realized I didn't know where I stood, or if I ever had. "I didn't know you came here," I said, trying for calm, too aware of how my hands trembled slightly. "I come sometimes," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Then, after a pause, "I bring my son on weekends." My stomach dropped. I hadn't known. I hadn't thought about him before. Her son, my friend. The little details I'd ignored, the reality I'd buried under daydreams, suddenly pressed down on me. "Oh," I said, barely audible. "Yeah," she continued, not unkindly, but with a weight I couldn't shift. He likes the poetry section. I nodded, silent. My mouth opened a few times, words stuck on the tip of my tongue. I imagined the conversations I'd rehearsed in my head, all of them suddenly impossible. She picked up a book, flipping it closed, and for a moment, she looked like she wanted to speak more. Maybe to explain, maybe to stop me from asking questions I shouldn't ask. But the moment passed. She tucked the book under her arm and turned. I should go, she said. I wanted to ask her to wait, to tell her it was okay, to say that I didn't care. But I didn't. I stayed rooted to the spot as she walked toward the door, each step measured, deliberate. The bell chimed behind her. I stayed where I was, staring at the empty aisle, the poetry books untouched, the chair where she'd been now vacant. My hands curled into fists in my pockets. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I wanted to text her, wanted to say something to cut through the space, the sudden distance, the weight of things unspoken. But I didn't. My phone stayed dark, and the bookstores smelled faintly of paper and regret. And for the first time in weeks, I realized some things might never be fixed, might never be said. And I wasn't sure if I even wanted them to be. It was raining lightly when I found her on the doorstep, umbrella half open, coat damp. I hadn't meant to come over, not really. But I had walked past 100 times in my mind, each step heavier than the last. And now I was here, shaking off the rain, hands stuffed in my pockets. She opened the door, hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in," she said, voice low, careful. The apartment smelled faintly of tea and something warm, familiar. I noticed the way she moved around the small kitchen, setting down her bag, adjusting a chair. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice felt thick, lodged in my throat. "I didn't expect you," she said, more observation than question. "Yeah," I said. I thought I should." I trailed off, unsure if I should finish the sentence or leave it floating in the air. She didn't press, just leaned against the counter, eyes flicking to mine, searching, patient. I wanted to cross the space between us, wanted to bridge it with words I wasn't sure I had. "I've been thinking," I said finally, voice almost inaudible. "About all this. About us." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, and I saw the flicker of fear, of worry, of something restrained. She didn't move, didn't speak. "I don't want to mess anything up," I continued, "and I can't stop noticing you. Or thinking." My hands fidgeted with the edge of the countertop, thumb brushing the worn wood. "About moments like now." She let a long pause hang. Then, quietly, she said, "I noticed too." That simple acknowledgement hit me harder than I expected. Her fingers drifted to the edge of the counter, close to mine, and I wanted to reach out. Wanted to touch her hand. But I didn't. Not fully. I wasn't sure if I had the right to. We stood there, the kettle ticking softly, the rain pattering against the window, the air thick with all the words neither of us had said before. I tried again, but she put a finger lightly against my lips. Not a stop, just a pause. "Okay," she said soft. Not a promise, not an end, just a quiet recognition. And that was enough. For now. I exhaled, relief tangled with longing. I wanted more. I wanted all of it. But there was a trust in her restraint, a careful honesty in the small gesture that made me realize vulnerability didn't have to be loud to matter. Her gaze met mine, steady. I smiled faintly. She smiled back. A small, human thing, and yet it carried everything. The hesitations, the fear, the near misses, the quiet pull between us. And for a moment, just standing there in her kitchen, wet shoes on the tile, coffee forgotten on the stove, I felt seen. Really seen. "Okay," I whispered back, and it wasn't ending. It wasn't even a beginning. It was just a bridge, a fragile, trembling bridge. Weeks passed, not in some dramatic rush of revelation, but in the quiet way mornings change, unnoticed at first, then suddenly familiar. I found myself walking past her apartment again, not out of habit, not out of expectation, but because it felt like the right rhythm of the week. She was in the kitchen when I arrived, sun just peeking over the rooftops. Steam curled from a mug of black coffee on the counter, the same kind she always had, no sugar, just bitter and warm. I lingered in the doorway, careful not to disturb, noticing the small crease in her forehead, as she read a note pinned to the fridge. "Morning," she said, glancing up. Her hair caught the sunlight in strands of gold. "Morning," I replied. The word felt lighter this time, carried by something that had grown in the pauses between us. Trust, quiet understanding, the patient threading of two lives that weren't simple, but somehow fit. We drank our coffee in silence, the kitchen alive with small sounds, the hum of the fridge, the click of her spoon against the mug, the occasional distant bark of a neighbor's dog. I caught her hand brushing the table, fingers trailing along the wood just so, and I remembered all the times I'd noticed her hands, all the tiny movements that had once made my chest ache. Later, we walked to the small park with the bench where so many of our near moments had happened. The branches were bare, the sunlight softer, but it felt like a ritual we'd created just by showing up. We didn't talk much. Just walked, paused, sat, drank tea she had insisted we take along. "You're early," she said lightly, half a tease, half observation. "I like being on time now," I said. Small joke, awkward real. She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't fix anything, didn't promise perfection, but quietly acknowledged it all. I watched her for a moment, noting how she tucked her hair behind her ear, how her coat fell just so over her shoulder, how even in ordinary motion she held a subtle grace I'd always remembered. And she noticed me noticing, and she didn't flinch. That alone was enough. The sun dipped lower, and we headed back. My phone buzzed with work messages I ignored. We were here, now, and that was everything. Before I left, she poured 2 mugs of black coffee, just like the first time, just like countless quiet mornings after. I took mine, stirring absent-mindedly, fingers brushing hers on the handle. No words were necessary. "See you tomorrow," I asked, voice low, careful. "Tomorrow," she confirmed. No need for promises beyond that, no need for labels. Just the steady pulse of our routines, small, earned, and fragile. I walked home, chest lighter than it had been in months. I remembered the leaf between us, the brushes of hands, the pauses, the near falls into confession. And I smiled quietly, thinking of one thing no one else could understand. How perfectly ordinary it all had become, how achingly familiar, and how enough it was. Coffee at 8:47 a.m. A bench in the park, the hum of the apartment. It wasn't grand. It wasn't dramatic, but it was ours. And that was more than enough.